It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening and welcome to the Onyx News. And I'm Margie K, your host. We're here every Friday evening at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. I just want to mention a couple of things. By the way, I just got back from the MUFON Symposium in Texas, and boy, is that a good conference. I highly recommend it. The information for next year will be up on the MUFON.com website pretty soon. So I encourage you to get your tickets way in advance, and it's going to no doubt be wonderful, just like it was this year. So gosh, good stuff. Coming up this year, okay, September is closing in really fast. The Contact at Sea cruise is booking up. Go to contactatsea.com for all of the information. Don't contact me directly. I'm not the organizer. I am a speaker on the cruise. So I want to get that straight because some people are confused about it. You'll have to go to their website that will give you all the information about the cruise, about the speakers, and everything else. They've got shore excursions, all kinds of neat things going on. It's going to be a great time, and looking forward to that. And then, of course, we have XCon 2024 in Springfield, Missouri this year, October 11th to the 13th, and we host that one. We have an excellent lineup of speakers, and I know you don't want to miss it. The hotel is booking up, so it's the Oasis Hotel. Go to unxnetwork.com for all the info that you need for that, and the early bird expires August 1st. So you want to get your tickets now, as soon as possible. My guest this evening is Danny B Stewart. He's a Utah-based folklorist, tradition bearer, professional storyteller, television consultant, and sometimes university professor who has been working in and collecting Utah lore since childhood. He's the owner and creator of the original Provo Ghost Tour, the Provo Faerie Walk, A.K.A. the 3-minute mile, and is currently finishing up the creation of a third tour in Cache Valley, Utah. Danny is an advocate for and of the importance of street-level fieldwork. He has single-handedly collected over 400 pieces of Utah folklore by interacting and collecting from actual live breathing folk. He's a contributing author for Utah Stories magazine and now UNX magazine. Welcome to the program, Danny.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am stable.
That's wonderful to know.
Right.
That's really good to know. How did you get interested in folklore?
Instinct and birth. I grew up on what you might call a haunted farm. And it was just something that was always a part of me. Probably the main catalyst was when my father gifted me a collection of childcraft books, and one of the volumes was called Mysteries and Fantasies, and I think I may have been like 5 years old when that happened, and just flipping through those pages and seeing hearing terms like alien abduction, which I'd never heard before, and finally putting a context to the term Loch Ness Monster. So it was kind of an encyclopedia and / dictionary where I was able to put images and context to words I'd heard, because I've heard these words floating around before, Bigfoot and that, but it wasn't really until about 5 or 6 when it hit me. And after that, I just kind of started instinctively collecting things. Like as young as 8 years old, I would talk to people and collect stories. In fact, I wrote an article a few years ago about these, I guess, for lack of a better term, hobos that would come on the train that would go past our house in Vineyard. And I remember walking out into the field because we had like this large, like the people say it's either 12 or 20 acres. I don't know. It was an old farm. The age of the farm ranges from 80 years to 150 years, depending on who you ask. It's probably more around 80 years. And this was like 1985 when it was that old.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this large field where horses and large groves of Russian olive trees. And one time I was just walking out there playing with my dogs, and I stumbled upon these two hobos who I sat down with, and they were super friendly. And they just told me a story about phantom trains that kind of went right by, where I lived. And I don't know if they were pulling my leg or not, but it was kind of, one of the first stories I collected. And it kind of, blasted me off into a career, with lack of better term, because I've always just been doing this. I collect stories for a living, and I preserve them too, which is, I think, something important that folklorists are kind of missing out on nowadays. There's more of an intent to understand why people are interested in, say, ghosts or monsters or things like that. Of course, folklore isn't just the paranormal. It's like foodways, textiles, how we interact. It's culture, folklore culture. In one way you could say, and there's probably people who would argue with me of this, but like culture and anthropology is a lot like folklore and vice versa, with the exception that I would say that folklore kind of focuses on the things that culture anthropology kind of brushes aside, things they don't want to look at, like fairies or fairy sightings. Of course, they may bring them up and kind of find some type of like theological context or things like that. But I think it's important that we collect these stories and maintain them. For me, the belief issue isn't a big thing. I mean, I will say I'm a believer, but that's not my main focus, mainly because there's so many individuals out there in the paranormal realm that are collecting these and out there looking for proof and evidence. What I'm trying to do is more just find the people who have seen these things and encountered these things and then pass them down through oral tradition and then kind of preserve them. What I'm going to do with them yet is still yet to be said, because I have over 400. I have been writing Tough Stories magazine, and I have like enough information for several books. It's just that I don't have an excuse why I haven't wrote a book yet, other than I've just been constantly teaching. I've taught art history, and I just got through a year ago teaching English at the university level. And then I just really need to get off my butt and start writing a book, because I have the information. I just haven't done it yet. You know what I mean?
Sounds like you've had too much fun out in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like I said, there are too many folklorists out there who are armchair folklorists. And I would apply this towards paranormal investigators too. I think that we need to stop just regurgitating the same things over and again. I love the story of the Hopkinsville goblins, if I'm pronouncing that right, or the Kelly goblins, whichever term you use. But we've just beat that to death. And I do think we need to keep talking about it. But if that's one of the stories we just talk about and regurgitating, or Loch Ness, regurgitating, we're not getting anywhere. And I think we need to learn the new stories, which is what I've been doing. And that also includes like lost love traditions. Lost love lore is one of my favorite realms of folklore to delve into. And I actually wrote a love lecture many years ago when I was teaching at UVU called Love, 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 LOVELUVWUV, one man's bitter interpretation of the folklore mythology of love. And the reason I did that was to actually get a girl to go out with me. And it worked. It worked quite well.
Okay.
But like, it's all manner of lore that I'm interested in. And it's the things that we're not really paying attention to, the ground level. How many people are out there walking into businesses and saying, hey, have you got any interesting stories to tell me? Just something as
Right.
simple as that.
Yeah.
Finding people. In fact, just this last week, I told you I was writing an article on Butch Cassidy for Utah Stories while we were first communicating on here. And I went around and just on Center Street in Provo, where I do my ghost tour, and just went up to people and said, hey, tell me, what do you know about Butch Cassidy? Just so I could get a feel of how Utahns feel about this kind of folk legend, this local folk legend. Granted, most people know about Butch Cassidy nationally, but there are some elements within Utah that has kind of made him more of a folk hero in some cases. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And so I was trying to make connections between him and certain parts of Utah. And I seem to be laughed at sometimes by other folklorists because I'm so proactive, which I don't understand why that's an issue. Yeah, I think
that's weird.
Well, we need to preserve the stories that haven't been told yet, and the way we do that is by simply communicating with the folk, reaching out and talking to people. And that's how I built my ghost tour. My the original Provo Utah Ghost Tour, it took me 10 years to build. You know why? Because I didn't Google a thing. Because I actually went out there and collected every single specimen. And some of the stories on that tour are things that kind of happened to me. Like the Phantom Clown story, which is about mid-tour. And my tour isn't about fear. It's never been about fear. It's never been about jump scares at all. It's more like edutainment and kind of showing people who come on the tour the kind of folkloric paranormal history of Provo and allowing them to understand, like, these stories aren't just things you see on TV. Like, this is in your own backyard. And so people get excited, like, oh my gosh, when they drive back down that same road, that place is haunted. That place had a phantom clown in it. That place, the guy saw a reptilian humanoid, which I just recently had one of my former college students reach out to me with a reptilian humanoid sighting on Center Street in Provo. I haven't figured out how I'm going to redo that one yet, because it's an interesting story and I got to figure out how to retell that. But people come to you, and I think you've had this experience too. I have a story to tell you. We sit down, we talk about it, I write it down, I preserve it, and then I decide how I'm going to use that story, whether or not I'm going to sit on it for a larger project, or if it's geographically appropriate, like close to my ghost tour, I may add it to my tour or write an article about it for Utah Stories magazine, or even in the future for an X magazine. And like I said, I have so many stories I'm sitting on. This right here, this is my ghost tour manual right here. This has everything I need for the ghost tour. This one right here is the Cache Valley Ghost Tour. Now, this is 10 years of research. This is 2 years of research. I got lucky because in 2 years, I was able to find around 30 stories, 30 fresh stories. It's not easy to be a folklorist. It's not easy to do fieldwork. But if you truly love what you do, if you are a folklorist, I would think you'd want to be out in the field talking to the folk rather than sitting behind a laptop or a computer or in an archive collecting stories that have already been documented.
Yeah, that is the easy way to do it. There are so many out there, but certainly there are many more. And I would think a person would want to add a lot more to their arsenal instead of what's already been talked about and copied and copied and copied over and over again by people. And it's always, to me, it's a lot more fun, if you will, to get a brand new story that nobody's heard about, or somebody who's been holding a story for 50 years that they haven't told a soul. And those are amazing. And I've got a lot of really good stories that way. I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing, like, so I'm interested in all of the subjects. So I'm going to go down the list of subjects and ask you for a story on each one. Starting with, the first thing that I saw as a kid were fairies. And so to me, there's no question that they're real. Would you mind sharing one of the best stories you've heard about fairies?
Of course. So I have a tour called the Provo Vortex, and it's not really a tour, it's more like a walk. And people hire me to take them on a walk in an area around Grandview, Provo. It's actually expanded the area itself of where I've been investigating, and kind of the more I'm learning, the more these stories are branching out beyond the vortex. But we'll say there's like this square mile radius, maybe a little more square mile radius, where I have collected over 35 stories of fairy encounters.
Oh.
And what I'll do is I'll take people out on this walk. You start at midnight, we head out and we walk around for 2 hours, and I'll point out certain spots where things have happened. And each and every time people come back saying, what the hell was that? Is that what I think that was? And my response is, I don't know. I can't say. But it was interesting, wasn't it? So one story I will share is I took a group of people out on the tour, and this was, I believe this was the winter solstice of 2018. I usually do a solstice walk every year, the fall, winter, and so on. And it's kind of an invitation only. So I brought my close friend, Andrew Kosorek. He's a glass artisan, but also a practicing alchemist and folklorist himself. And he brought his daughters, and we had a couple other people too. So we get to this one area called Lions Park. Actually, you know what? I should back up a second. Hold on. There's a reason why I called it the Provo Vortex and the 3-minute mile. Sometimes you'll be walking and you get into the Grandview area, and all of a sudden you make a turn and you're a mile off course. You don't feel anything. There's no disorientation. There's nothing like that at all. It's just all of a sudden, it's like something quickly picked you up and moved you. And then you try to find your way back. Now, I have multiple eyewitnesses for this happening with me. It's happened to my wife and I. When I was still teaching at UVU, I took students out on this midnight walk. They'd get freaked out. They'd go, what the heck's happening? Why are you playing a trick on us? I'm like, I'm not. It's not me. It's them. But it's all in good fun.
Yeah.
So the goal itself is to first make it to Lions Park. If you make it there, that's the thing. The beautiful thing about this is it's never predictable. You never know what's going to happen. And I think that helps it to be more believable, because it's not just the same thing happening over and over again. So on this solstice night, it was there was 9 of us, because I don't allow more than 9 people on this midnight tour, because it has to be kind of intimate and not like a party. And we get to the park, and on the east side of the park, there is a trail that starts and it walks around the entire park. And we're on the east side of the trail, facing north. And there is this large stone monument that has like a plaque on it. Well, I forget who mentioned something, but they said, what was that? And we all saw what looked like something about, say, a foot tall, run across the snowy park, probably about, say, 12 meters, and then jumps behind the monolith and then plays peekaboo with us for about 3 to 4 minutes. Kind of like popping back behind the thing like this.
Okay. Wait, monolith?
Well, like that's what I'm calling it. It's this big stone. It's like a big like 7 or 8 foot long stone. It's like at the side of the park that has a plaque on it.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. And it's part of the park's decoration. And so it was playing peekaboo with us.
Oh, wow.
And eventually it just kind of ran off and disappeared. And we all went to it. Now, 7 of the 9 people, including myself, saw this thing. We watched it for this long. They will tell you that it looked like a humanoid that was about a foot tall, that was just kind of messing with us. I'm kind of a little bit more like, again, I want to preface, I'm very open to believing, but as a folklorist, I have to kind of maintain a mid area where I can leave it open for like scientific pragmatism and vice versa. Because I work with scientists. I work with Dr. Paul Bybee, the paleontologist, Joel Bradford, the anthropologist, and I throw things past them, back and forth. to see like, what do you think this would be, to keep me more grounded. And then it also helps them to be kind of more open-minded about the metaphysical elements of the human experience, so to speak.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And it's for another story. So there's this one little road that goes east-west on your way to Lions Park. And there was this couple, I think this happened to them sometime around 2013, if I'm correct. And there are these old little canals on both sides of the road. And it's a very kind of cozy little road. The road's no longer than maybe like 50 feet. It's a short little road that leads to the Lions Park. And there's these little canals. They're about this deep. Some people call them Mormon canals. I don't know why they're that, but it's old irrigation. And they were about full of water. Again, no deeper than like 1.5 feet to 2 deep. And as they were walking, they started hearing behind them, splash bloop, splash bloop. And these are their words describing this. And they're like splash, something running across the road, and splash again. They turned around and nothing was there. As they keep walking, bloop, splash, across the road, and then again. And when they turned just in time to see what they said was like a little humanoid, a little bit shorter than 8 foot tall, jumping in the water. They walked over and nothing was there.
Oh,
granted,
my.
it was night. It was about like 12 or 1 a.m. ish, but there was nothing there. So these are the things that people keep encountering in this area. Up above Lions Park, there's these steps you go up to Jordan Avenue. You take Jordan Avenue, you go north, and it takes you to Grandview Park. And there are multiple things going on there. It used to be a little elementary school, which then turned into kind of like a technology school, which is now closed. But the story goes, and that there was a kind of the ghost of an unseated janitor in the girls' bathroom.
Okay.
So you take that wherever you want. And that's kind of one of the things I heard. But there's a little playground right next to it. And right next to that playground used to be a little garden, probably like, say, 12 feet by 7. It had a fence around it. I remember this garden being there, so I went back to look at it after I heard the story. 2012, another couple around 1 a.m. was coming from the north end of Grandview Park from a road. And as they're walking down, heading south, there's a little hill that heads down towards the playground. And the girl stops the guy and goes, "What? Did you see that?" And inside the little garden area was a little gnome. Their words. And it was like playing in the dirt or digging in the dirt. And it was like kneeling down doing this. And she's like, "Is that a marmot? Is that a gopher?" And the closest they got, they were probably about maybe 15 feet away from it when it stood up.
Uh-huh.
And it looks to them like, "What the hell are you looking at? Why are you staring at me?"
Oh, my.
And then they kept walking like, maybe we should just leave this thing alone. And as they kept looking back, and again, this was dark, but there are lights around the school. It's before the school closed. And they watch this thing kind of like, as they leave. They don't come back the same way. They leave and they come back the next night, coming a different direction. So let me rephrase it. They don't leave the park the same direction. They head north, leave the park. The next night, they come back from the north to the area, same little park, and the thing is in the garden again.
Oh, my.
And it's like just kind of messing around. As they get closer to it, it kind of leaves the area and then disappears till finally they see it right next to the school, next to a pillar in the light. And again, they say that they saw what looked like a little man with little suspenders that were purple and black checkered in color. And kind of playing again like peekaboo. Peekaboo is a big thing with fairy folk, with the stories I'm collecting. They'll play peekaboo with you forever.
Oh, I've heard stories like that.
And behind this load-bearing pillar, it was by the school, and they walk over and it was just gone.
Did it have the typical gnome hat and shoes and things like that?
They said the most they could notice was like the color of it was like a little short suspenders that were purple and black checkered. and
Okay.
no hat, but kind of funny little ears, kind of pointy ears, they said, and kind of a little longer nose. People would probably say, well, that sounds like Dobby from Harry Potter. I'm like, well, I don't know. This thing, maybe that's what it's all based on. Maybe these archetypes are correct in some cases. You know what I mean?
Does anybody ever get photos of these things?
I wish they did. I've tried getting photos of things that I thought I saw in the past, and I've failed each and every time. I also don't take a lot of technology with me ever. The most technology I ever take is this and my digital camera, which I rarely ever bring out. I'm not a big advocate for the use of technology. I will dowse. I'd consider myself a master dowser with the pendulum, but even then, it's just kind of these things happen, and then they're so quick or they're so dumbfounded that they just fail to take a photo because it's like they can't believe what they're seeing at this time.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself. Okay, we are up on a break, and we'll be back right after these messages.
This September 6th through the 13th, join with like-minded souls in the experience of a lifetime on the Royal Caribbean Ovation of the Seas as we travel from Seattle to Alaska. Internationally renowned researchers, investigators, experiencers, authors, holistic healers, contactees, spiritual luminaries will sail on an extraordinary voyage of transformation. This cruise will explore UFOs, alien contact, cover-ups, ancient mysteries, the paranormal, holistic healing, and spirituality. Experience engaging lectures, one-on-one sessions, private, custom-tailored excursions, and a nightly UFO watch. The cruise is booking up fast. Go to contactatsea.com and be sure to mention the UNX Network when you book. That's contactatsea.com or phone 336-749-1219. That's 336-749-1219. The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
we're back with the next news. I'm your host, Margie K, and we're speaking with Danny B. Stewart this evening about folklore in Utah. So, Danny, let's go. Let's go to some more stories. I mean, I could talk about fairies all day, but and gnomes certainly. What about some other subjects? What are your favorite subjects to talk about?
I'm a real big fan of thought forms and tulpas. I've
Oh.
been doing a lot of work, and I've written several lectures with that. I've been playing with the ideas of like asking the question, what happens when like say 1 million people think about Bigfoot at the exact same time?
Oh, yes,
What does
indeed.
that do? Does that do anything, or does that create something? I mean, because I'm sure you're familiar with Leadbeater and Besant and their work with thought forms
Mhm.
and tulpas and that. And I'm a big fan of their work. In fact, Annie Besant is absolutely brilliant. And I've so I'm sure you know what a thought form is.
Oh, yes, I've experimented with it myself.
And there's a lot of hypotheses that artists, surrealist artists specifically in the early 19th century and possibly before that, dabbled with thought forms to create their artwork. And you go into the trance state intentionally, and your emotions kind of create, like the color is your emotion, and the color is always the same depending on the emotion, but the shapes are always different. It's like a moving Rorschach sometimes when you experience these things in some
Mhm.
cases. But we could take it a step further, whereas some people have kind of brought up the idea with me, like my mentor, Alex Caldiero, the sonosopher and poet and folklorist in his own right, about like, what are these things that people are seeing? Could some of these events, some of these creatures be thought forms? That doesn't make it any less, amazing,
Or real.
these things or real.
Yeah.
And there's even that hypothesis that if enough people are thinking and focusing on something, it stays, it lingers.
Mhm.
And I find that absolutely fascinating when it comes to things like Loch Ness, because
Oh, yeah.
we're looking at this, we're not finding anything, but people keep seeing stuff. And of course, it could be a fish, could be like water or wake or whatever. But it's fun to hypothesize about this, especially when you think about, like I said, what happens when 1 million people think about Bigfoot? What happens when the whole world is thinking about the Loch Ness monster, so to speak? That energy has to go somewhere, you would think. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just a big hairy monkey. But it's still a fun thing to consider. And I have played with the idea, some other ideas with Mormon folklore that I can't really get into right now, and its connection to thought forms itself, which I don't want to talk about because it's kind of a completely original idea that I want to play with. But there's so many different ways that you can take the whole thought form concept and direct it, like even UFO phenomena, or the term we're using, like UAP, whatever we're using now. What are we seeing? Are they things that we have created with our emotions,
Mhm.
or are they something very real?
Mm.
I hate this thing. Like I remember reading somewhere, and I'm going to butcher this quote completely. I forget who said it, but if you have to consider like the answer to these questions, either everyone is lying who's seen these things, everyone's a complete liar, everyone's insane, or people are seeing things. Do we want to live in a world where everyone is insane and a liar? I don't think so. Now, keep in mind, I
Right.
butchered that quote, but that's kind of the thing I'm trying to get to.
Mhm.
And I think Grover Kratz himself said something along the lines of, consider if just one of the how many thousands of Bigfoot prints is real. All we need is one real one. And how many have we found throughout the decades, potentially centuries, that people have stumbled upon? I think that that's a pretty good argument, at least amongst us. It might not fly amongst the more stiffly thinking scientists, but I think that's something to
Yeah.
consider.
Left brainers would have a difficult time with that concept, but I certainly think that is something we need to consider, because we are creators. We do create things around us. And I have personally seen and experienced that myself. So yeah, that's entirely possible. And what happens if a lot of people think about the same thing at the same time? Are you aware of the group of people who meditated on a crop circle shape overnight, and the next morning, that crop circle shape was created in a few seconds in a field right next to them?
I have not heard that one. No.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly who the group was, but I know it was a credible group of people. And yeah, so how did that happen? Did they create that with their thoughts, or did some other type of consciousness get capture their thoughts via telepathy and then create it for them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's more than one way to think about it. Certainly, I think I think that's great. What about Bigfoot story? What's a really good Bigfoot story that you've heard?
Well, my own sighting.
Oh, good.
Yes. I hadn't owned this until the last few years ago, and I decided, forget it, I'll own it. I kind of put it as like a little boy I had seen it, but keep in mind, I still don't know what I saw, especially where I was. I was in Vineyard, Utah, on my farm again, and I was walking out on the north side of the farm, and there were, again, this big, huge collection of Russian olive trees. And if you know anything about Russian olive trees, they're thorny. You can't walk through them. You get poked. You get cuts. It's just kind of a nasty mess.
Okay.
And it was during watering season where we had the entire field full of water. And my 5 dogs were just going nuts out there. So we're all out there playing in the mud. I'm like 9 or 10 years old. I forget which. And I stop and I turn, and towards the back end of we were in the back end of the field. So maybe about 50 or 60 yards away from the house. And I turn and I see this, I think I see this big, hairy thing standing about maybe 15 or 20 feet away from me amongst all of these olive trees, and standing there with his arm kind of up like this. Now it's not like resting on anything, because you can't rest on these olive trees, but it's kind of like, I remember like holding on to something. And I'm looking at this thing, and all I remember is this big black mass with legs and an arm kind of just breathing heavily.
You were close.
My dogs, which shocked me, didn't even react to it whatsoever. Oh. And they kind of just they kind of sniffed and they left. Well, I backed up and I backed up most of the way to the house looking at this thing, because it appeared like it was looking at me the whole time. I'm probably mistaken, I don't know. But when I got to the fence that was just, right at the backyard of the house, I turned around, hopped over, ran to the house, went upstairs, went to the bathroom, looked out the window to see if I could see it again, and it was gone. And for years, I sat on that story until I wrote about it in Utah Stories magazine. And again, I didn't own the story as myself. And until later, I was just like, you know what? Whatever. I'll own it. I'm trying to be kind of scientific, pragmatic about it. Like, we're in the middle of a business district. We're right behind a huge cement company. We're surrounded by businesses, and something like that I wouldn't think would be in my backyard. So I was either the stretched imagination of an 8 or 10-year-old little boy, or I saw, maybe the Green Man. Maybe the Green Man was saying hello to me, saying, "Hey, I'm watching you." I don't know. And it's hard for me, like, to maintain a level of scientific approach and pragmatic approach and still be a believer and talk about these things openly. Maybe I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't know. But, it was an interesting experience. Whatever it was that I saw, it was obviously friendly.
Nothing since?
Nothing like that since. No, nothing like that since.
Wow. Well, let's go to the ghost tours. You here's a picture of you talking to the group. Obviously, there's a lot going on in Provo. So, and I know you took quite a long time to put this together. We showed this one too. Here you are leading the group. Tell us about the tour.
Well, it's a 2-hour long, 1 mile stretch. And I got really lucky to find this many stories in this little area. And I just kind of, after I had found the stories, I was part of an art collective with some former students of mine. And we were just kind of thinking, why don't you turn your ghost tour into a professional thing? Because it originally started as an extracurricular activity for my students at UVU. Because each semester I'd say, I'm going to give you all a free ghost tour, invite whoever you want, family, friends, a date, whatever. And we would get up to like 150 people on these nights. I felt like Moses. I was dragging these people all around downtown Provo, and I had no voice for days after, because I was just screaming at the top of my lungs. And then I started doing it professionally in 2016, and it's been a hit since. I'm a one-man band. Like I have to, and that's the hardest part. Like I feel like I could get more things done if I had what we all want, funding. But
Yeah.
I do what I can to put this thing together, and there's no fluff, there's no like jump scares or anything like that on the ghost tour. But what's really interesting about this is when you are talking about the same spot or same area, it gives you the opportunity to watch it evolve, which brings me up to Shaky Jake, the ghost of Shaky Jake, and what used to be the city limits. So for years, I heard rumors that this bar had been haunted. And it wasn't until 2016 when I finally went in to investigate. It was about 11:45 at night. I go in, and first you have to understand that this bar looks almost exactly like Moe's Tavern from The Simpsons. Or it did before it closed. It was a friendly place. It was a nice place to go. People would say it was a seedy bar. It wasn't. It looked seedy, but they were as friendly as kittens. They were just such nice people.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in and I'm like, so you got any interesting stories here? And she says, well, what do you mean? Like a ghost? And no sooner than she said ghost, this very eloquent drunk comes in and goes, well, I can tell you about Shaky Jake. I can tell you all you want to know. And so I sit down with this guy. His name was Bruce. And he began to tell me that Jake was an old customer who'd been there since the early 1940s, late 30s. When you're talking about folklore, dates always get fuzzy. So if you fact check the date, whatever, I don't know. But that's just what I was told. And he had a bad day. He goes across the road to what was the Imperial Hotel, takes his life, but he comes back. And he'd been there ever since. Mm. And after he got done talking, the bartender, she says, do you want to go into our basement? I was like, yeah, I want to go in your basement. Are you kidding me? So Tara, my wife, she wouldn't go down there with me. So before we go any further, you got to understand, there's like this big, long pathway that goes down where they used to roll barrels of beer down into. And it ends like this big wooden door that's like really hard to push open. I push it open, and there was one solitary light bulb. And I go in there and I turn it on. And before I go any further, I want you to get in your mind the seediest, scariest, creepiest bar basement you can think of. Mm-hmm. Do you have it?
I got it.
That's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hello, is anyone here? Does anyone have anything to say? Crickets. And I go to this one room that has like these boxes of Christmas decorations. I go, hello? And I hear, validation. So I go back upstairs after a few minutes. Like I didn't run out. This wasn't my first haunted rodeo. So I go upstairs and I sit back at the bar, and she says, what do you think? And I was like, well, what's going on in that room with the Christmas decorations? She goes, did you hear it groan? Oh, I was like, oh, yeah. If you go down there sometimes, something will groan at you in that room. I'm like, wow. Well, Later that same month, I'm out telling this story to a group of people, and right when I get to that part, a person on the who used to work at the bar goes, "Something will groan at you, won't it?" And that's a third validation. Well, there had been various stories of things like it throwing a shot glass across the bar and shattering against the wall. In fact, they told me they had film footage of this, and they had promised me like 5 different times they're going to give it to me. I never saw the footage. But there was my friend of mine, Tucker, who worked there, and he'd tell me all these different stories. But that's not important because it's kind of mirrors most of your bar ghosts. But the great thing is there was no fear. Like they all loved him. In fact, when I went in there, started talking, they're like, "Who are you? What are you trying to do us?" Until they realized who I was, and then they opened up. So COVID comes.
Yeah.
And shuts everything down. They reopen, and all the previous employees had to get new work. And so it's all new employees. So I go in and talk to these people, and I say, "So anyone talking about Shaky Jake?" "I don't care about Shaky Jake." And I was like, "I don't care what you care. I don't want to know what you think. Are people still talking about it?" He's like, "Yeah, people bring it up now and then." Well, the bar closed. And this leaves us with an opportunity. It's currently for sale for $800,000. And if I could if I hadn't already sold my soul, I'd do it to get this money. But here's what I'm planning though, is I'm watching this because eventually it's going to reopen and we're going to witness 2 things. One of 2 things. Either going to witness the death of a ghost, either literally or metaphorically speaking, because no one's going to be talking about it there anymore, or the people are going to experience something and we're going to see the evolution of a ghost or a spirit or a story. So I'm really excited to see what happens, because once something goes in there, I'm going to wait a year. And after a year, I'm going to go in, I'm going to start talking to people. And then we're going to find out how this evolved. And it's kind of a very simple story, but it gives us an opportunity to see it evolve. Like for example, there's Alan with the B&H Pharmacy, which is just east of that on the same side of the road. And B&H Pharmacy, they love their ghost. They love him. He was a former pharmacist. There's different ways how he died. The story goes, back and forth. But I'll go in and talk to the main pharmacist, Kent, and he'll say, "Oh, our ghost is still here. I haven't seen him, but my employees have." And evidently, like this kind spirit will go up behind people and whisper their names. And he's even been seen, evidently, like facing. What I mean is like taking a ball of Tylenol and kind of making it nice and fresh on the aisle, and they'll hear him down in the basement back and forth. But again, I've been watching.
So he's still working there.
He's still working there.
Yeah.
He's still there, and that's one thing I think is important to point out. Like, I have a very, very unhealthy collection of horror movies. Like, there it is right there, and on the other side is a whole other 1,000 movies. But I am willing to say that horror has done a great disservice towards folklore because it makes everything evil, everything dark,
right?
Everything's going to get you,
right.
know? But of all of these stories I've collected, I've only had like 1 or 2 that are really negative experiences. And people come to me, and I have to explain, like, I'm not a clairvoyant. I'm just a storyteller, and I'm a story collector. So don't expect me to come bust anything or tell you what's going on. But they always say, like, "I've seen this. This is in my house." I'm like, "Well, does it scare you?" "Well, it's kind of creepy, but it doesn't do anything bad." And I'm like, "Well, so what's the deal? Do you want to have like someone come in and get rid of it, or what?" It's like, "No, I just want to know what it is, because I'm just curious. Was it my grandfather? Was it my aunt, etc.?" So many stories where there's not anything negative to it. And I think we need to start focusing more on these benevolent stories and not so much on focusing on a jump scare or, "Ooh, the haunted tour of this, this thing's out to get you. Who knows what lurks here?" It's like, no, these things could very well be real. And there's a chance they could have emotions just like us. Who knows? it's kind of disrespectful, I think, to assume that every single one of these things is dark and evil and satanic. It's not the case, at least from my firsthand experience and from the stories I've collected. It's just this fear of the other that brings us to this darkness.
Well, and a lot of horror movies, scary movies, The Exorcist comes to mind.
Yeah,
They're always going overboard for entertainment value.
of course.
So, what do you think the reason is, or is there a reason for, say, a cluster within a mile or a downtown square having a lot of hauntings in that area, and then other areas you go to, there's nothing? What do you think that is?
I think, well, like for instance, with the Vortex, I think it's a very sacred spot. I think there's something very special about it. I think it's a refuge because there are so many parks. There's not just Lions Park. Like you have multiple parks, and there's a river running through it, and it's just a perfect little area for things to thrive. This, as far as where places things aren't happening, maybe people aren't paying enough attention, or maybe it's not a friendly place, you know? Maybe it's just not friendly for anything to linger. Maybe there's a different kind of energy going on there. Maybe that's where the negative energy is, where you don't see things, but maybe just bad things happen. I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard to know when we're dealing with the other side, so to speak.
Yeah,
that we call it, that I feel is other dimensions, but
well, I'm
knows?
totally open for that too. Like the dimensional hypothesis is very interesting to dig into. It's fascinating stuff. Fascinating. And I feel very, very lucky as a folklorist because I'm taking advantage. Because like where I'm at, I'm surrounded by stories and lore. Like we have a monster in Utah Lake. We have stories of three-toed humanoids on the other side of the lake. We have strange deaths in the lake. Utah Lake is something that needs to be focused on, and it's something I want to start doing because it's ignored. And I have another thing. Like, oh yeah,
gosh, I know there's a lot of monster hunters around this country. This is the first I've heard of it. So
Yeah.
what is the monster in the lake? Do you know what it is?
Oh, no one knows what it is. I've just like Mormon settlers talked about, sightings of like a fire-breathing alligator, or like serpents have been reported. This is all 1800s. As far as modern day sightings, like my close friend, he's from Hawaii. He immigrated here. And his name's James Chase. He gave me the permission to talk about him. Where I think it was like 2000 or 2001, there are these kind of, and I may be wrong, either irrigation canals, some type of large bodies of water separate from the lake, where he says he saw something the size and width of a barrel drum that has like silverish golden color with like yellow stripes on its back, surface like a whale and go back down quickly. But what's really weird, like this lake isn't super deep. I think I remember reading like it's like some points like 20 feet at the deepest, and that depends on the season and the summer. Because I remember when I was very young, walking during a drought, walking almost across it with my big brother. And like it came up to my knees at the deepest. And we stopped almost a little bit past halfway because it's coming up to our stomachs. We weren't know what we were doing, and we didn't really want to, drown in case there was like some drop off or some muddy silt. But it's a really strange lake. Like there's so many elements. Like they've had competitions. We've had professional athletes drown in that lake where it is like super shallow. Why? Is it cursed? Is this something dark? Is this a dark area? Who knows? But then we have the Provo River, and right next to it, in most cases, you have the Provo River Trail. Now, on Geneva Road, and this is heading towards Utah Lake, you're on the trail, and right after Geneva Road, and people who know the area know what I'm talking about, as you walk deeper across and next to the lake, I've collected stories of this nature spirit that is Native American. I don't have any connections to like which Pacific tribe, But I've collected stories from a few different Native American friends who have talked about this thing supposedly living in the area, and then talking to people who have said they've seen this like 12-foot tall floating apparition in a green cloak with the skull of a bison. No arms, no feet, floating, but in that general area. I've never seen this thing. I've gone there several times, right where people have seen it, hoping to see it, because I'll go out at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. That's our prime time research. Here's the thing for
really?
all of you wannabe researchers out there who want to get out there and do some research. Get out there at 1 a.m. and go for a walk. That's all it takes. Go out with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your whatever. Go by yourself and just go for a walk in your neighborhood and keep walking. And stuff happens. Stuff happens all the time. We're just not paying attention to it, looking for it.
Yeah.
Like there's the Park of Lost Bunnies a block away from my house. For years, it's the Paul Reams Park. There have just been bunnies living there. Who knows where they come from? These aren't like jackrabbits. These are like little fluffy bunnies you buy in a pet store. In 2013, a former euphemism of mine and she was also a folklorist. We were out walking in her neighborhood, just on the bench north of the vortex itself. And we're just walking in the neighborhood, and I will swear to you, I swear on Empire Strikes Back that we saw about 20 bunnies come out of nowhere and hopping in the middle of an urban neighborhood in the road. Just come out and just start hopping around.
That's bizarre.
What is that?
That's bizarre.
Are those bunnies or are they something else? But the same goes for that park right next to my house, because different color bunnies keep popping up. But it's been like that for years. It's not like someone's just dropping off, unless there is a group of people dropping off bunnies every couple of months, which I think that's
highly
less
doubt
believable than
that.
something else.
Well, Danny, this has been absolutely fascinating. I hope you'll join me again sometime.
Absolutely.
We are unfortunately out of time for today, and watch for Danny's articles in UNX News Magazine. This is Margie K. Thank you so much, Danny. All right, everybody. End of the show for today, and we'll see you here again next week.